Inside Spurs is brought to you by our partners talkSPORT Bet. New customers get an exclusive offer of £40 in free bets when you bet £10. Go to talksportbet.com/inside Spurs to claim this offer now.
That happens in the Bundesliga, and he doesn't like it. He gets kicked. He's constantly moaning to the referee. He's not alone in that. But if you look at the performance on opening night against Bayern, Leipzig lost 6-0 and he disappears. That doesn't happen all the time, but the fact that it happens at all is something that Thomas Frank will have to work on.
Hello and welcome to this bonus episode from Inside Spurs. My name's Sonny Snelling, and today I'm joined by European football expert Kevin Hatchard. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Yeah, great to be with you.
And I'll tell you what, we need you on this episode because it's a lot of transfer reaction, and Tottenham seem to go into Europe to do a few of their deals in the final week of the window. And my first question, actually, and I actually said to our producer, who's also called Kev as well, that we needed to get you on because every montage I watched of Xavi Simons had your voice in it. So I thought there's no one better who's watched this person firsthand.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a new thing in the sense that we're used to this in the Bundesliga. We see players leave and there's always a new generation coming through, or you hope there will be. So Florian Wirtz, obviously, it's huge to lose him because he's been one of the outstanding players in the league in the last couple of years. But, you know, before him, there was Kai Havertz at Leverkusen. And you look elsewhere, you know, Frankfurt have had some great players that have left. Luka Jovic at one stage we thought was going to be one of the preeminent strikers, but he probably made his move to Real Madrid too early. So we're used to it by now. Gvardiol left Leipzig. We lost Upamecano. We've lost strikers as well. So they are great at unearthing and developing talent, these Bundesliga clubs, and I'm sure we'll have new stars coming through.
Yeah, and the fact that your voice is all over these montages, because, you know, 2025 seemed to be the year of the montage and, like, absolutely amazing edits. How did you feel when you were hearing your dulcet tones on some of these compilations?
Yeah, I suppose I'm used to it by now. Yeah, it's always fun. It's always thrilling when your stuff gets used in that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's nice to be... It's a great league to be associated with. It's a great league to commentate on. I've been lucky enough to do it for 10 years on Bundesliga alone, on TV now. So yeah, it's always great fun.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you know, some Bundesliga players, past and present, have moved in the last few years. And you've got to think this is the 10-year anniversary since we signed Heung-min Son from the Bundesliga. And look what he went to achieve at Tottenham. But we'll talk about Xavi Simons to start with, and what you sort of expect from him after seeing him at RB Leipzig.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting player. I mean, I think this is a better fit for him than Chelsea would have been, because I think ultimately the main man at Chelsea is Cole Palmer. That's the truth of it. And so that isn't going to be as big a problem at Spurs, because I think he'll have more room to really stamp his authority on the team. There's great stuff. The way he moves, the way he beats people, his intelligence in terms of assists, goals. Very, very good player to watch, and I think Spurs fans will love him. My only concern over him is sometimes the body language is not great. Sometimes the attitude isn't all that it could be. Now, I don't know him personally. All I do know is that throughout his time in Germany, there has been talk of, is his attitude the best? Can he be disruptive? That kind of thing. Now, that might be unfair. That might be just idle gossip. It might not be, you know, something that deserves to be attached to him. But there is no doubt that that debate's been in there in the German media. And even when he left, there was a big editorial in one of the major publications in Germany, the major football websites, about the fact that this may be a good thing for Leipzig in the long run in terms of the harmony of the team and maybe making it a little more democratic rather than one superstar. So that bit I'm really interested in. I'm sure Thomas Frank will do a great job with him. I'm sure that it's not as black and white as that, and it's a more complex picture. So I'm sure there'll be a few rough edges to smooth in that regard. But in terms of his talent, it's undeniable. You know, the technical ability, the balance, all of that. So I think he'll be an exciting and positive signing for Spurs in the long run.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about his attitude, so I'm glad you brought that up because you were on talkSPORT about a month ago talking about his attitude and why Chelsea should maybe be concerned. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I guess from a Spurs point of view, after what I've seen is, and I remember Thomas Frank did a interview with Jake Humphries, and he sort of said when he was at Brentford, he had a no D-head policy. I won't say
Yes.
the words. So maybe Thomas Frank sees it as a player that he can develop, still very young. And also, I read something in another article that said that Thomas Frank apparently, when he was pitching to Xavi Simmons, he wasn't showing him how he could work. He was sort of showing the flaws in his game and how he could
Yeah.
improve on them. So what do you make of that sort of approach from Thomas Frank?
Yeah, I think you know, you look at Xavi and you look at where he's been at huge football clubs. So he's seen how the top stars do work and he's seen how they do operate. And some of them are more controversial than others. But I think my only concern about him is how is he going to react to some of the physical punishment that's coming his way? Because that happens in the Bundesliga and he doesn't like it. He gets kicked. He's constantly moaning to the referee. He's not alone in that. But if you look at the performance on opening night against Bayern, Leipzig lost 6-0 and he disappeared. And if you look at the third goal particularly, there was very little effort from him to close down Serge Gnabry in the build-up. Now, that doesn't happen all the time, but the fact that it happens at all is something that Thomas Frank will have to work on. But as I say, this is still a relatively young guy who's had a lot of experience for a young guy, and the technical quality is undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, his pathway speaks for itself. PSV, Leipzig, PSG, and coming through La Masia as well. You've got to be a special talent to come through La Masia, I believe. But yeah, I mean, from my point of view as a Spurs fan, and I was at the game on Saturday against Bournemouth, we are crying out for creativity. There's just no link-up play between the defence, the midfield, and the attack at the moment. That's because of absences of James Maddison and Darren Kulusevski. So I just think as long as he can bring sort of those dribbles from deep that I've seen of him in the Champions League, and even the only time I've seen him firsthand was I was at the Euro semi-final last year where he pickpocketed Declan Rice and lashed one in from about 20 yards. So we all know he's got that potential. So it is, one to see. But another player I want to talk about, our deadline day signing of Randall Kolo Muani. And I've done a deep dive on my own channel, the Science on Spurs YouTube channel. Description should be in this video as well if you want to check that out. But, this is a player who has been linked with Spurs. I mean, I remember about 2 or 3 years ago, he was being linked with us when Ange Postecoglou first came in, even as recently as 6 months ago. And there's some question marks over it because, he had, and you can tell me more better than this, Kev, he had a great start to his career really in France and went to Frankfurt and really delivered. Then at PSG, probably not given a chance. And then his loan at Juve was quite successful. So how do you see him fitting in this team, which already has Richarlison and Dominic Solanke up top?
Yeah, I think he is a great pickup. I said on the morning of deadline day, I thought he'd be a great market opportunity for somebody because you have to bear in mind this was a guy that most of the market thought was going to Juventus almost all summer because that was expected to be the deal. He'd been very successful there on loan. Juve had the will to get it done. PSG were happy to get him out of the building because he's not a player that Luis Enrique particularly likes in terms of what his fit is for the team. And so that looked as though it was a deal that was going to get done. Something went wrong in terms of maybe PSG changed the conditions, maybe they asked for too much, and Juventus turned to Luis Openda instead and brought him in from Leipzig. So suddenly you had a player that can play wide, can play through the middle, has played in the World Cup final, has succeeded in the Bundesliga, and he was available. And I think Spurs have done the right thing. I actually thought, I was kind of gobsmacked that Bayern weren't more active in chasing him rather than Nicholas Jackson. I thought he would have been a much, much better fit for Bayern than Nicholas Jackson. But they didn't, and Spurs took advantage of that. And you've got a guy that is mobile, is quick, played really well for Juventus. When you bear in mind he hadn't played a lot for PSG in the build-up to that loan spell, he's pretty much scoring goals from when he arrived. Important goals as well, big goals. And he helped them qualify for the Champions League. So there's absolutely no reason why he shouldn't be a successful player at Tottenham.
Yeah, and do you know what it is? And Tottenham have done this summer. Is they're signing players that we didn't have in that sort of makeup. You know, Randall Kolo Muani, Mohamed Kudus, João Palhinha. You know, lots of players that we didn't have, like a tough six or these sort of mazy dribblers as well. And one more question on this. And Tottenham fans were crying out for a left winger on deadline day, and Randall Kolo Muani was the last signing that we did make. But Xavi Simons and Kolo Muani can both play on that left. Are you confident that, you know, there was names being touted around like Adamola Lookman from Atalanta? Do you think Spurs maybe should have still gone for that sort of player, or do you think they've still got enough? Because obviously they've got Tell and Odebear as well in that position.
No, I think they're well stocked there. I think Kolo Muani can play from that area if you want him to. Obviously, we know him as a striker, but he can play in a wider role. Xavi's a bit different in the sense that he will naturally gravitate out to that left-hand side. But I wouldn't necessarily start him out there. I don't think that's the best use of him. I think what you want really is him in kind of more central areas or the kind of inside left channel, half space, if you like, and then let him do his thing, really. So I think they've got plenty of options on that side. I wouldn't be overly worried.
Yeah, I'm quite content with our window. I gave it a 7 out of 10 on my channel. I think we've done quite enough. But moving on from transfers now and looking ahead to the Champions League, Tottenham back in it after a couple of years' absence after winning the Europa League last term as well. And this is a question that I put in myself because I'm really confused about it, Kev. How does the player registration work for the Champions League? Because there's a lot of Spurs fans on social media, I don't know if you've seen it, worrying that certain players might miss out. And there's a debate whether, like, will we pick Tell or Odebear? So how does it work for the campaign?
Yeah, so this is to do with you've got to have a certain number of club trained or association trained players. So you've got to have 8 in your squad, of which 4 are supposed to be club trained. And what that means is you've either come through that particular club as a youngster, if you like. I think it's 15 to 21. You've got to have had a 3-year spell in there or in that country's association. Now, Spurs have got a few of those, but they don't have enough of the club-trained ones. And so whereas you'd normally have a 25-man squad, I think they've effectively got 22 because they've only got Brandon Austin, the goalkeeper, who is effectively club-trained. So I think they've got restrictions in that regard. I imagine what they'll do is they'll probably look at players who were injured for most of that period and they won't select them. So James Maddison, I know the final 2 league phase games are in January, but realistically, if Kulusevski's out till December, is it worth putting him in the squad? If Maddison's out for ages, is it worth putting him in the squad? Dragushin is another one they've got to make a decision on because he's going to be out for a while. So I imagine that's the way they'll go with it, but that's effectively Spurs' problem, is that they don't have enough homegrown, if you like, players in that squad, and that's where they're struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at a few different Tottenham creators making their lists last night, and honestly, the head scratching that Thomas Frank's going to have to do over the next few days is. I'm glad I'm not in his shoes, but I think we all know certain players that we want. And you know, the draw was obviously made on Thursday last week, and in my opinion, I was quite happy with the draw. There's a few teams in there that we played obviously last year. I'll go through the list now. We've got Villarreal at home, Bodo Glimt away, which we know was a little tricky fixture last year. AS Monaco away, reuniting with Eric Dyer. FC Copenhagen at home, PSG away, which Randall Kolo Muani can apparently play in. Slavia Prague at home, Borussia Dortmund at home, and Eintracht Frankfurt away. So, Kev, what do you make of that? A little bit of a Bundesliga flavour to it as well.
Yeah, and it's a nice little mix, actually, in the sense that you've got home games that you would expect to win, realistically. Some tricky away games. Frankfurt away is always going to be tough. Bodo Glimt, you know already from the semi-finals of the Europa League. But I thought Spurs dealt with that admirably. I must admit, I was one of the ones who thought they might struggle. I thought they might go there and really find it tough early on. But they didn't, and they managed to really dig in. So I think there's enough fun games in there. Even PSG, you know, they were 2-0 up against them in the Super Cup, as you know, and couldn't quite see it through. But I think there was enough in that performance to suggest that they could be competitive. So, yeah, I think it's a really nice mix of games, and Spurs should be feeling that they can certainly do enough to make the playoffs. Top 8 might be a stretch, but you never know. But I think they'll certainly feel they can make the playoffs at very least.
Yeah, and considering we were in pot three and Chelsea were in pot one, and they got Bayern and Barcelona, I thought we did quite that well. Like we knew we were going to get one big name from pot one, but Dortmund will be a fun test. A lot of these teams, funny enough, had a bit of change over the summer, haven't they? So that'll be really interesting. And the first game, and I'm speaking of a lot of those changes, we're playing Villarreal at home on Tuesday, the 16th of September, and they've had a lot of turnover this year. You know, Solomon coming in from Spurs, he will be able to play against us. Thomas Partey. They lost Pino to Palace, and Tieno Barry's gone to Everton. So, how do you sort of see this matchup going, Kevin? Game week one.
Yeah, it is a lot of change. Alex Baena is probably the big name as well. Has
Oh yeah.
gone to Atletico Madrid, so they've lost him as well. But I think they've made some really interesting signings, and I think Georges Mikotadze, bringing him in from Lyon, I think is a great signing. He's done brilliantly since going to Lyon. And I think Lyon didn't really want to let him go. They've kind of done that to balance the books. So I think that's a great signing for them. But the star is the coach, really. Marcelino, I think he's, you look at his track record, it's excellent. They're used to fighting against the odds. They've started La Liga pretty well. So it's not an easy game by any stretch of the imagination. But I think if you go into the Ceramica, I think that's a different proposition. I think Spurs will probably fancy that. But there are some dangerous players in that Villarreal team, no doubt about it.
Yeah, I can imagine as well the theories from a lot of Spurs fans. Obviously, this is Thomas Frank's first season with European football. He usually gets a week to prepare to facing the likes of Brentford, City, Bournemouth. So this will be intriguing to see if he's able to juggle that European football. Can you imagine he could?
I think he can, but he has to answer those questions because he's kind of put them up himself in the sense that he said, look, I unashamedly junk cup competitions to be successful in the league. Now, of course, that was necessary at Brentford, he would argue. But it's completely different at Spurs. He's expected to compete in every single tournament. And so I think he can, but he's got to prove he can because at Brentford he simply didn't, and he showed no real interest in juggling competitions.
Yeah, it's going to be a really, really interesting season for Spurs, and hopefully the signings of Xavi Simons and Kolo Muani can hit the ground running. But I want to say a massive thank you to Kevin for joining us today. Obviously, you can check him out all over talkSPORT, giving us great updates of European football. But if you have enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, let us know in the comments what you make of the two signings, Xavi Simons and Kolo Muani, and stay tuned for more Inside Spurs episodes coming up on the talkSPORT YouTube channel.